Hi everyone. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land I meet you on. I'm on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I know wherever we are today, we meet on Aboriginal land, and it always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Welcome, welcome. So next slide, thank you, Caitlin. So after acknowledgement, thank you. So I'm Delia Donovan. I'm the CEO of Domestic Violence New South Wales. And as most of you know, I'm about to have a baby any day now. Just over 39 weeks today, exciting. And of course, there was no stopping me jumping into this very important presentation launch with the team today. I'll also be presenting our new strategy with our awesome interim CEO, Elise Phillips, who'll be taking the Domestic Violence New South Wales reins on while I'm on parental leave for the next 6 to 9 months. Elise will speak in detail about the 5 new strategic focus areas and how, with your feedback and your support, we came to each of these. I'll be speaking today about the journey, the consultation process, our roadmap, and how we hope for a future as Domestic Violence New South Wales enters 50 years of feminist work in New South Wales and what that future looks like. Following today's official launch, you will all receive a copy of the new strategic framework, and further, a copy will be located on your website from tomorrow. Now for some really important acknowledgements. None of this work, of course, could be achieved without our diversity of members, our incredible survivor advocates, the committees we support, and the other important allies and stakeholders here today. And I've seen those that are here. Thank you so much for coming, and really pleased that you're here, noting your passion and advocacy for our work. Importantly, this work is grounded in an ethics of care. And what that means to us is that we centre our members' voices and all of our relationships throughout our work. It means as well that we will strive to ensure our stakeholders are listened to, respected, and their voices are centralised as we amplify them. It means we will centre the voices of people from marginalised groups and consult intentionally and with purpose. We particularly thank the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Women's Committee for their voice, their guidance and support in developing this ethics of care, which you will find in the strategic plan. I also want to thank, in this part of the acknowledgements, Jennifer Mullin and Meredith Turnbull, who gave their support in facilitating several team and board planning days. Your energy, guidance and objective brains were truly embraced for this process. Finally, a huge thanks to the domestic violence team and board who spent days sharing their passion, their expertise, their knowledge to help shape this strategy. The importance of recognising where we've been, where we're going was really, really crucial. And I'm deeply, deeply grateful for the commitment, the time and the energy given to this work over the course of the year, again, highlighting the rigour behind this strategic plan. So firstly, who are we and what do we do? Domestic Violence New South Wales is the statewide peak body representing over 130 specialist domestic and family violence services across metro, rural and regional New South Wales. Our peak body membership includes so many life-saving services for women, children and LGBTIQA+ people. These members include refuges, case management services, counselling and therapeutic services, women's health centres, legal services, women's domestic violence court advocacy services, specialist multicultural organisations, Aboriginal controlled organisations, lived expertise advocates, and many, many more on the front lines. And you can only imagine what that does in terms of the evidence base for the peak if our consultation shows that rigour I spoke to. Our vision is for women, families and communities in New South Wales to live free from violence, have equal rights, equal opportunities, and the freedom to reach their potential, and all of our work contributes to this goal. It's the vision that turns all of our work, our policies, our advocacy, our submissions, programs and collaborations into real long-term systemic change. Next slide, thank you. So our history. A strategy doesn't exist unless you can reflect on where you've been, whose shoulders you've stood on, and where you're headed. It was so important in this process for us to celebrate, recognise and acknowledge the long-standing feminist history dating all the way back to 1974. So that was 1974 when the first refuge, Elsie's, was built and the women's refuge movement was born. This relevant and important history is embraced in our new strategic framework document, and we wanted to thank those who gave their time, and I wanted to thank those, and we actually, board, team, everyone, personally thank those who gave their time to this live and ongoing project. That includes Maha Abdo from Muslim Women Australia, Kat Gander from DV West, Mubalsh from the WAGEC, Women and Girls Emergency Centre, and Bobby Trower from YWCA. Thank you for your experience, knowledge and support. It's been invaluable. This history is very, very important to the peak body, particularly as at the end of it, we'll turn 50, which is 2024. So today, when you receive the strategic framework for 21-24, you'll find a timeline of history that documents key events from 1974 all the way through to now. This work, of course, forms a larger history project, which we look forward to updating you about in due course. And further, as this strategy looks towards 2024, our 50-year anniversary and beyond, we can see all the steps in this journey, past, present, and future, that aim to lead to a society in which women, LGBTIQA+ people, and children will live free from violence. The consultation process in this strategy was a large and important piece of the work to us, commencing in January 2021 and ending in December 21. When Domestic Violence New South Wales set out to design and implement a new 3-year strategic plan, we knew it would be no small feat. Months of brainstorming, reviewing, analysing, consultation and planning went into the designing of a strategic plan that would reflect the goals and outcomes we're striving towards. We wanted every facet of Domestic Violence New South Wales, our members, our lived expertise advocates, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Committee, other key stakeholders, including government and other peak bodies, to have an opportunity to provide meaningful, considered input into the planning process. And we thank each and every one of you for being so fundamental in that process. You will see in the strategic document this process, the steps we took, and again, thank you to everyone who contributed. So there'll be a page on consultation, and you can see how we took that process across the course of the year. Now, onto the strategic focus areas, which you will be familiar with, given your input to develop and mould them. I should also mention here, this isn't just a high-level plan. Each of these focus areas now sits within an internal 3-year implementation plan with organisational KPIs and goals. So everything we do now aligns to these focus areas and will measure our impact year on year. Furthermore, the internal implementation plan commenced in July 2021. So we've started a lot of this work, which you would have seen through last year's organisational restructure and the soft launch of our 6 advocacy priorities on the 25th of November, the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women last year. So back to the focus areas. We've identified 5 focus areas in order to meet our core strategy, which is to sustainably deliver effective, meaningful impact and change across the domestic and family violence sector that ultimately benefits the New South Wales community. I now hand over to our interim CEO, Elise, who will be key to the implementation and oversight of these new 5 strategic focus areas as our interim CEO. Thank you, Elise.
Thanks, Delia. Hello, everyone. It's really lovely to be here. I am Elise Phillips, the Interim CEO of Domestic Violence New South Wales, and I too would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land. I'm on the land of the Dharawal people today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. It's really fantastic to be here to support the launch of the Domestic Violence New South Wales strategic plan for 2021 to 24, especially as a large part of my role moving forward will be to oversee that implementation in Delia's absence. So let's begin getting into a little more of the detail. In this section, I will share some of the feedback from external stakeholder analysis and then share and confirm the key priorities under each strategic focus area. So as you can see on the screen, our first strategic focus area is sector development and capacity building. During the consultation phase, some of the feedback we heard from the sector and from our members was that there should be co-design of the domestic and family violence service system that includes DFE victim survivor advocates and takes into account their lived experience. We heard that we need to encourage collaboration between organisations and look at how each organisation can evidence that they are working together with others in the system, and that there should be accredited specialist training for DFE sector workers. Therefore, our work moving forward to support sector development and capacity building over the life of the strategic plan will focus on 5 priority areas. We will be developing tools and resources for our members to enhance sector capacity. We will be advocating for sector-wide cultural safety training and working to increase collaboration and information across the sector, and also between the DFE sector and the broader social services sector. We will be increasing the DFE workforce development and capacity and promoting best practice trauma-informed responses to domestic and family violence. Moving on now to strategic focus area 2, which is primary prevention. Again, during the consultation phase, some of the feedback we heard included that service mapping is required, as currently work in the space is very siloed and it's unclear what resources we have and where the gaps are. You noted that Victoria received 72% more funding in this area than New South Wales, and this means that organisations delivering this type of work are often relying on fundraising. We also heard that resource sharing is needed as services are doing primary prevention work, but it's not necessarily being shared or well known across the sector. Therefore, under this focus area, we will work to ensure that there is increasing awareness of the need for DFE primary prevention. We will be delivering DFE primary prevention education ourselves to communities, and also advocating for increased funding for existing domestic and family violence services, including very importantly, our members, to deliver primary prevention programs themselves, because we know that both a statewide approach and local initiatives are really important for primary prevention to be effective. And finally, we will be developing primary prevention resources and tools to support you as our members to undertake that work. Moving on then to strategic focus area 3, which is very, very importantly, promotion of specialist domestic and family violence services and programs. Some of the things we've heard is that funding bodies need to recognise that domestic and family violence is a specialised field of work, so that governments rather appropriately allocate funding to specialist services and not just to those organisations with a high profile or who have the money to pay tender writers. We also heard the importance of media and communications in this space to raise up the profile of the existing services in the sector. So what we aim to do over the life of our strategic plan and beyond is to promote services and programs that are intersectional, feminist, trauma-informed and embedded in their community. We will be ensuring the inclusion of marginalised communities in service delivery, promoting a trauma-informed focus on children and young people. Importantly, advocating for sustainable long-term funding and contracts for specialist DFE services and programs. And that's absolutely essential, because without those long-term funding contracts, our members can't offer long-term employment contracts to their staff. And then that impacts job security and contributes to challenges in recruiting and retaining qualified staff to the sector. And finally, we will be increasing community awareness and education concerning the importance of specialist DFE services. So really across the board, we want governments, we want communities, we want everyone to recognise the importance of specialist DFE services and to invest in them. All right, 3 down, 2 to go. Our 4th strategic focus area is organisational sustainability and capability. Of course, in order for DV New South Wales to be able to deliver the 2021-2024 strategic plan, the organisation must be able to develop sustainably and have the necessary systems, processes, resources, skills and governance in place to support the work of the sector. To do this, 7 priority areas of focus have been identified, including sound financial management, ensuring that we are delivering value to our members and developing our membership base. We've seen an increase in our members over the past several years, and we hope that continues, because the more voices we represent, the more likely it is that people will listen to, that key stakeholders will listen to our advocacy. So we certainly want to keep all of our existing members and hope that you will continue to promote our work and promote the value that being part of this group offers. We will be increasing our revenue through diversification and fundraising, so we're not solely dependent on government funds. Developing long-term mutually beneficial corporate partnerships. We will be designing and implementing an information and technology management strategy. Ensuring that we have effective and robust reporting and governance, including being able to report on our progress in all of these strategic initiatives, and implementing best practice HR policies, systems and workforce development, so that our own staff can continue to develop and enhance the skills that they need to do their work, and to have a supportive workplace to be their best. All right, moving on to our 5th and final strategic focus area. And I'm really passionate about this particular space: systemic change and thought leadership. All of our advocacy work in the sector is underpinned by an understanding of the intersectionality of domestic and family violence, including disability, age, mental health, intergenerational trauma, race, gender, sexuality, ethnicity, class, and immigration status. In consultation with members and the wider sector, DV New South Wales has developed 6 key advocacy priorities, which Delia mentioned before, were soft launched last year on the 25th of November. Our first advocacy priority is sustainable, non-competitive and long-term resourcing for the DFE sector, because you told us that funding should not just cover the bare bones. We want Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities to live safely and free from gendered violence, because you want us to recognise the ongoing impacts of colonisation and that we operate on stolen land. You also told us that you want specialised services for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, as that produces much better outcomes. And we need to work to dismantle common misconceptions that there is already a lot of funding in that area. Our third key advocacy priority is to have children and young people who are supported as victim survivors in their own right and live free from gendered violence, because our stakeholders highlighted the impact that DFE has on children and young people. We want safe and sustainable housing pathways for women and children and LGBTQIA+ people who are experiencing gendered violence, because you pointed to the need for housing that goes beyond short-term and crisis accommodation. We need to advocate for a trauma and gendered violence-informed justice system. We heard you suggest that we address the prejudice of people who are working in the legal framework and systems against people who are working in the DFE sector or clients who are within the DFE system. And finally, our 6th advocacy priority is to have culturally and linguistically diverse communities who live safely and free from gendered violence, because of course work with these communities is a major part of the domestic and family violence sector. And you want our recent advocacy on women on temporary visas to continue. Now, of course, our advocacy work will not be isolated to those 6 priorities, noting, of course, the nature of our work across the state. However, these 6 will certainly be prominent in lots of our work. That's it from me. Thank you. And back to Delia.
Thank you, Elise. Wow, much to achieve and work on there. So moving on to our roadmap. The strategic plan for 21 to 24, as mentioned earlier, is underpinned by a 3-year implementation plan, which will certainly guide our next 3 years. However, we all know, especially those of us working to create real systemic change, that this is long-term work and we will need more than 3 years alone. Our roadmap therefore sets out short-term, 1 to 5 years, medium-term, 5 to 10, and long-term goals beyond the next 10 years. We believe the next 3 years in this plan will be crucial for paving the way on this roadmap. We have plenty we want to see and have listed each of these goals in the roadmap page of the strategic framework, again, which you will receive today by 5. Some of those short-term goals include that domestic and family violence is higher on the political agenda, that government is actioning recommendations made by Domestic Violence New South Wales and its members, that there is increased sector funding, including a baseline increase. Some of the medium-term goals include a whole of government approach to domestic and family violence, increased jobs and better pay in the sector, increased funding to primary prevention and early intervention in domestic and family violence, and statewide minimum service delivery standards. And finally, beyond the 10 years, in our roadmap, we want to see communities living free from gender-based violence, gender equity. We want to see women, families and communities in New South Wales have the freedom to reach their potential. So do make sure you check that page out when you get it today. So looking towards the future, what does the future hold for this strategy? As we look towards our 50th anniversary in 2024 and beyond, we can see how all the steps in this journey, past, present and future, will lead to a society in which women, children and LGBTIQA+ people live free from violence. We hope to see 2024, or we hope to see a 2024 that sees increased community awareness of the issue. We hope to see true accountability at all levels of government through a whole of system approach. And we hope our work ensures sustainable long-term funding, increased employment to our sector, recognition of the specialist workforce and commitment to its ongoing development, and ultimately a reduction of the prevalence of domestic and family violence. Our work, of course, going into the future will of course embrace partnerships and collaborations. This isn't Domestic Violence New South Wales' plan, this is our plan. We will walk alongside our partners and supporters. Respectfully, we will walk this path with our members, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Steering Committee, our lived expertise advocates, the reference groups, partner organisations, and with, of course, the ongoing support from our funders, donors, volunteers and sponsors. Together, our voices will be louder, more inclusive, and will create change. So thank you. So there you have it. We wholeheartedly thank you for helping us to get to this point. If you have any further queries, please email admin@dvnsw.org.au. The work starts now. We'll continue to work side by side with you on this plan through the various sector chats and committees and alliances we all work together on. Keep an eye out for this plan as it hits the inboxes today. And again, you will find this featured on our website from tomorrow. Thank you everyone for today.